ever since the release of Shadow of the Erdtree. The location of the Shadow Realm has been subject to many debates and theories. Whether on planet Earth or in fictional settings, geography and history are intrinsically linked, making this particular mystery all the more fascinating. Knowing the past shape of the entire continent could provide key context, potentially bridging gaps in our understanding of Elden Ring's history and the events that shaped its complex lore. In today's video, the analysis will unfold across two sections. First, we'll sum up established facts about this topic, laying out the scattered pieces of the puzzle. Then, we'll connect them into plausible theories and examine popular ideas from the community. Before we begin, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. This humble turtle would be very grateful if you did.
Truth be told, I'm rather fond of the stuff. I'll happily take it off your hands.
Let's dive in. As far as we know, there's only one way to enter the Land of Shadow. Touching the hand of Miquella's withered body, the lifeless remains contained within his damaged cocoon. The moment we do, we are transported to the gravesite plain, right beneath a ruined church. Not much is known about the logic behind this transposition, or why Miquella seems to have two bodies. Thanks to Ansbach's dialogues, we do, however, know that he used his half-brother Mohg to gain entrance to this place, meaning that whatever it took, he presumably couldn't do it on his own. This might seem surprising, given the considerable resources at his disposal as leader of the Haligtree faction, and his ability to control minds. All that is to say, wherever the Land of Shadow ended up, it manifestly can't be accessed by conventional means, like walking or sailing, for instance, which is important to keep in mind. At first, we might assume that this place is entirely separate from the lands between, like some sort of immaterial purgatory in another plane of existence. Looking at the sky, though, an important detail stands out in the skybox, anchoring this region within the broader narrative of the lands between. High up in the sky, somewhere above the Shadowtree's canopy, we see a set of spectral drapes flowing down from a golden light source. A very similar setting to Queen Marika's bedchamber, evidently pointing to her involvement. In that regard, consider the Mimic's Veil, also known as Marika's Mischief, which allows its wearer to blend in to their surroundings. Based on these hints, the Land of Shadow seems to be concealed beneath a wide-scale enchantment, the kind only a goddess could perform. This implies a certain degree of proximity to the lands between. After all, there'd be no need for such an illusion if it were distant. One of the most prominent features of the Shadow Realm is its unusual verticality, with disjointed landscapes piled on top of one another in ways that form unnatural cliffs and jagged coastlines. Going back to where we first set foot in the gravesite plain, for instance, it seems strange for a church to be built in such a precarious spot, unless the land around it used to look different. We know the shattering of the Elden Ring was felt in this region, just like it was in the lands between, where it seemingly changed the landscape. We also know of the Hornsent's stone anchors, deployed to quell the fury of earthquakes, which must have been a frequent enough occurrence for them to devise mitigating measures. This all points to major changes to the region's geography, adding a layer of complexity to our investigation. South of Castle Ensis, we find a lone structure at the edge of a cliff. The suppressing pillar, as it is called, provides a major clue, and a pretty clear one at that. According to the etchings on the stone, this spot is, or perhaps was, at the very center of the lands between. Looking at the overworld map, the simplest conclusion therefore points to the Central Sea, a spot suspiciously covered by clouds. Looking out toward the outer sea, off the coast of Stormvale and Redmane Castle, we can see shipwrecks out in the distance. The inner sea of the lands between is, however, completely empty of boats, or harbors for that matter. That could be explained by the sheer waterfall cliff out near the isolated Divine Tower, preventing maritime travel from the surrounding ocean. Curiously, the waterfall runs along a perfectly straight line across a large distance, which doesn't seem like a natural occurrence. Above all, though, we're left wondering where all that water is coming from. There are no visible rivers feeding into the inner sea, and, given the volume of water involved, it should have drained into a lake by now. A possible explanation is that there's hidden land here, concealed in the shadow, or reflection of the Erd tree. A land with several rivers that could explain the elevated sea level. Based on these assumptions, the task remains of fitting the Shadow Realm within the inner sea, which we'll get to in a moment. Before we move on to theories, though, let's briefly mention a few more things to consider. Behind Laendel's fortified manor, there's a broken divine bridge. We don't know where it led in the past, though given its orientation, perhaps it was once connected to the Shadow Realm. The Jagged Peak area shares strong similarities with Caelid's Dragon Barrow, and may have been connected to Farum Azula in the past. The Cerulean coast is littered with stone coffin ships that drifted there, which only makes sense if it faced a decently large body of water, not a narrow river or strait. The Shadow Tree is described as the shadow of the Erd Tree, which implies that they're geographically close to each other. The Divine Tower's positions could be relevant, assuming their convergence point marks the location of the suppressing pillar. Lastly, gameplay proportions should also be considered. According to game director Miyazaki, the Shadow Realm is comparable to Limgrave. This first theory fulfills most of our established criteria, with minimal overlaps to coastlines and landmarks. On the flip side, though, the Shadow Realm seems relatively small compared to the Lands Between's regions. This theory from Reddit user ColeAl puts emphasis on in-game scale, using rise towers as reference. In this case, the Rao Ruins area fits nicely within Altus's coastlines, and the overall scale seems to match gameplay distances. It does, however, feature significant overlaps with the lands between. An interesting theory from a YouTube channel called Elden Gamer posits another location. They argue that the swirling water motif off the coast of the bestial sanctum matches the shape of Farumazula's tempest, and thus marks the position of the jagged peak. As was the case with the first theory, though, it could be argued that the landmass's proportions look too small. Assuming the Shadow Realm is an amalgamation of separate lands, this theory splits it into 4 sections. This layout would explain the disjointed biomes, though the location of the southern regions is somewhat far-fetched. Assuming that the continent formed a ring-like shape, the Shadow Realm would have been a land bridge between Caelid and the mountaintops, which would explain a few things. However, the Pillar of Suppression is off-center in this case. If you'd like to share your opinion about these theories, be sure to let us know in the comments. Thank you for watching.